This is day 3 of the November 90 7-day retreat at Springwater. There are a number of questions yesterday that we never even touched, and I have written down a number of new questions. Again, I have heard from people their appreciation for hearing these questions, so I will read them. I didn't write down every question. There were many that were very worthwhile, and I didn't have time or forgot. I've always thought of this work of attending as being something heavy, being a serious effort. And by thinking that, it has been that way. And with this attitude come thoughts which I experienced as resistance to sitting, resistance to attending. Seeing all that this morning, directly there is a lightness and the absence of effort. Yesterday you said that making statements to oneself about one's condition can aggravate the condition, have an impact, which is more emotion, more anger or fear, whatever. But I have found that sometimes making a statement about my condition is helpful. The example that was given was telling myself or someone close that I'm irritated because of PMS. Or saying to my husband, I have low energy today. I finally realized that there's nothing that I have to do in sitting. But now, during sitting, the problem is that not much is going on. And I think endlessly of certain things, like, for instance, food. What I'm going to eat, now or even after retreat. How can one get rid of the ego? I feel what is going on here, for instance, being with fear completely, is not the same as the psychotherapy that I engage in with my patients. I feel something is different. What is that difference? Could you sometimes speak about what is time? There have been occurrences in my life where there was no feeling of time, just being here, and wondering why everyone else was so concerned about tomorrow. And then I'm wondering whether there's something unusual about myself. Can one ever know truth And can one deceive oneself, believing one is seeing the truth, when it is an illusion? Having done a lot of sitting, I have believed that sitting and sitting regularly and sitting a lot will have an effect upon my life, bring me closer to liberation or enlightenment or whatever experience. Now I'm beginning to wonder about that. Is there something in sitting as the cause of an effect? Also yesterday in the group meeting, we were mostly looking at anger. Reporting about being angry, looking at it, the hurt one is causing others. Also reporting that when there's great anger, sitting by oneself, looking at it directly and the anger dissipating, and being able to return to the person one was angry at with open arms. And then someone asked, why do we become angry? And someone replied, what's wrong with becoming angry? And the person kept with the question, why do we get angry? And another question, well, isn't it natural to get angry? But why do we get angry? Someone kept asking. Does this have something to do with a question we read yesterday? If I ask a question, I want an answer. What is the use of asking a question if there is no answer? Or something like that. We have grown up with questions and answers all the time. Our parents were delighted when we started to ask questions and delighted to answer them. What's this? What's this? Little child, what is this? And answers come from the parent. Of course, more than an answer comes from the parent. There comes an interest in the child, attention given, a communication. Sometimes I've wondered whether the child is really that interested in getting a name rather than in this communication with an interested parent. But we've learned that it's a good thing to ask a question, a good thing to get an answer or to give an answer. It's always appreciated if somebody knows an answer, unless there's competition going on, who has the best answer or the right answer. And of course in school, the way I was schooled and our son was schooled, there was all giving answers, even timed answers. The faster, the better, which distresses many children, distressed our son. They give these math answers in a timed way, and if the time was up, then all the problems you hadn't answered were counted as mistakes, minus. So something has been programmed into our system that questions need answers. The sooner the better. And we have lots of institutions for giving answers, including the marvelous institution of an encyclopedia. You can look it up. Very interesting answers to questions. And yet, yesterday in that meeting, someone kept insisting asking a question. And explanations that were given did not satisfy that question. Why do we become angry? Because there is a different kind of a question that does not demand an immediate answer the way we conventionally give it in terms of explanation. This is so because of that and that and that. Because that remains usually at the verbal intellectual level. And because of our previous conditioning, the mind is satisfied with getting that answer and has never investigated thoroughly and found out for itself as something happens, why it is happening, as it is happening. So there are questions which can be kept unanswered, and yet active and alive, wanting to find out, but not answering from previous remembered experience. We're not saying there's anything wrong with previous remembered experience. We need that to exist. And it can be helpful. Explanations about why one gets angry can be very elucidating, interesting, and also helpful. And yet, they may not help to see at the moment of getting angry, or hurt, or afraid, what is going on right now. And if a question remains unanswered, and yet actively working in the mind and body, one wants to find out, then maybe that can bring about some awareness at the moment of getting angry. Who knows? We have to find out for ourselves. If we want to know why we get hurt or angry or afraid, and not in terms of now having the explanation, but seeing it as it happens. That alone can be truly freeing. And not to have any prejudgment whether this is possible or not. It seems utterly impossible at the moment of getting angry to also be aware, because anger means flooding, or fear means floodedness. Hurt is floodedness of every cell and tissue of the body. The organs are involved, the glands. The mind is spinning. One wants to find out, why do I get hurt? Why am I afraid? What is fear? Why do I get angry? Really, with an open interest to find out about this human being who stands for all human beings. To really find out about anger or fear or hurt as it is triggered, develops, is maintained or withers away. We find out about anger, hurt, and fear in human beings, not just my own personal one. Because the same mechanism operates in all of us. No matter where we live or at what time or in what social class. The same person yesterday who felt it was impossible to be aware as anger arises. Remembered recently being hit by a falling branch and, to his surprise, not being angry. He says, at other times I may have chopped down the tree. I know this myself. I used to get really angry, hitting myself. I've reported it in a talk before. And in the beginning, when this used to happen, not having any wondering about it, just getting angry. And then slowly wondering, why do I get angry? And still getting angry, but noticing it more. And then one day bumping into something and not getting angry over it. It was not that I had to do something, quickly become aware of it, but the surprising or astonishing thing was here there was a hurt in the shin and no anger. Does that have something with being really seriously occupied with this, wondering, interested in it? And not because anger is wrong, we're not looking at it as something wrong, but as we all know from past experience, people get very hurt that we express anger to. And that is a relatively small effect, but throughout the world so much is done in anger. People are destroyed out of anger, and revenge is taken out of anger, which is called righteous anger. It doesn't have to be condemned or accepted, it can be looked at. And it's, as we said yesterday, the events speak for themselves and doesn't need additional judgment. So, coming to the question, how does one get rid of ego? It's not a matter of getting rid of anything. Where does the question come from? I want to get rid of ego. How can I do it? I want to be a better person. I want to enjoy the benefits of not this drudgery of ego when it is a drudgery. But often we want to keep it when it is a pleasure. But can one see it, look at it, be aware of it, learn as one goes about self-centered reactions, which come so quickly, are so involving, so enclosing, to learn about it as it happens. And maybe one time there will not be a self-enclosed response. There'll just be an awareness of what is about to come up, but it doesn't quite flourish because it's seen. And no one has planned to get rid of it, because in seeing there is an intelligence operating that does not need the schemes and plans of the self-structure, which is our thoughts and ideas and hopes and wishes. Someone asked yesterday, how does one make decisions? Could you talk about that? Again, can that question, even though we're discussing here, remain alive so one can watch for oneself how one makes decisions? This whole process, be attentive to it, interested in it. Because so easily what is said here becomes just another statement, another explanation that can satisfy the inquiring mind, and therefore the question is dead. It's the danger of giving talks. If the talk arouses questioning and the questions remain, then it may be helpful. But if one feels, oh, now I know about it, then what is enlivening, namely wondering about things, has been sort of satisfied and is put into the completed file. So how do we make decisions? Often people say, what is free choice? There is free choice, isn't there? We love to believe that we have free choice. God gave us the freedom to choose between good and evil, says the Bible. And Adam and Eve, out of their own free will, chose to eat from the tree of knowledge, which is also the knowledge of good and evil. How do we make decisions? Is there freedom in that? What do we mean by freedom? Freedom from what? Freedom to choose what we like, what will bring us satisfaction, gratification, pleasure, remuneration, fame, popularity, whatever. Is that our freedom to choose what will bring us that? There's something like this in the constitution of this country. Everyone is free to pursue happiness. That's questionable whether that's true. I don't believe it is. But apart from that, what is that freedom to choose happiness? What is it based on? Ideas of happiness from past experience? What has been gratifying before, remembered, and then projected into the future, and this is what I want to do or get, because there will be satisfaction again, happiness. That's how we make most of our choices. May not be that we want to gratify our body, but we may be identified with a cause, a group, a religion, a political movement, identified so that becomes our identity. That's me then. And on the basis of what's good for this party or this group or my family, on the basis of that I choose what will be beneficial to that. But it is, isn't it, a limited view. So, is freedom to choose based on limited view? What will be good for me or what I identify with or am connected with, cherish, value? We're not speaking about right or wrong, we're looking. Should I stay in the city? Should I move to the country? Should I change my job? As long as some kind of self-centeredness, which is not being condemned here, we're looking at it. As long as some kind of self-centeredness is operating, the decision is not free. The choice is not free. it is based on like and dislike preferences, based on past experience or ideas, or both. And we call that freedom. The ego has freedom to choose what it likes, what it wants, what it prefers. So we think, and so we act, but we're questioning. The basis. Is the basis free at all? Which is our past likes, preferences instilled into us, or remembered. And they operate as a force, maybe not even conscious. Sometimes people say, I have an intuition that this is the right thing to do. And I've found that it's a very touchy thing with a lot of us to question intuition. There's almost something sacred about talking about my intuition, my intuitive feeling here. But it's all right to question even sacred things. What's the basis for it? And of course one will say, I don't know, it comes intuitively to me. It comes as a dream. What is the dream based on? One can ask and wonder, maybe not have an answer, but not take it for granted that intuition, there is a sort of magical freedom. What is intuition? Does it have idea in it? Does it have remembrance? Is the past in there? We're not condemning it, we're looking. With that, there is no freedom. There is tiedness, boundness. Is there any decision one can ask which is not based on the past, on preference, on self-center? Self-center can be identified with altruistic causes, with abandoning one's self-interest for the sake of the group, the nation, the political movement, the religion. Abandoning self, but now holding that as me. Is there any decision not based on any of that? Probably most of us here have had some occasion in which something was done, some action was taken, which was not premeditated, did not come out of vacillating, should I do this or that, what is the right thing, what will be good for me or mine. Usually at a time of crisis this happens. When an earthquake happens, people do the most amazing things with the most amazing energy and clarity of right action, pulling someone out from under a collapsed highway, regardless of color, age, skin, past, future, regardless of the peril to one's own life. Does such action, pulling someone out of a pool who is drowning, just jumping in and pulling this person out, is that based on a decision? Usually people say there was no decision. It was just doing it. The seeing was the doing. Usually accompanied with energy and clarity. accompanied by energy and clarity. The action it's inseparable. So when something is very clear, and that only takes place when the self-center is not active, is not in the middle with its preferences and fears and wants and needs, when it is quiet, when the energy is just here, then there's no decision. Then it's clear what to do or what not to do. Doubt can come up at any moment, and the moment doubt comes up, am I doing the right thing? Then all kinds of considerations, how will this affect my family or me or the people? And then there's not clarity, then there's decision-making, choice. So choice, we're coming to, seems to go with self-center and its considerations and deliberations. Self-center not said in a condemning, critical way, in a factual way. A mental, physical structure energized that brings forth all doubts from the past, all considerations, experiences, and so forth. Throws it into the pot. But when energy doesn't travel in that network, then there is no choice. There's only what needs to be done. And usually the energy is there to do it, or not to do it. And that energy is without effort. It has nothing to do with, I must be clear, because that's self-center operating. I must become a clearer person, as clear as so-and-so. These are considerations and thoughts coming out of this whole past structure of me, which is constantly added to with new experiences, new remembrances of what was pleasurable and what was painful, dangerous or gratifying. Maybe in this connection we could look at the question of what is time? We all have a sense of time to some degree or another, some people more than others. It can be a great bother if has this internal alarm, wakes one up even when there's no retreat at 4 o'clock in the morning. There's something conditioned to wake up at a certain time. One looks at the clock and there it says what time it is. One has woken up. And it's not yet time to start a meeting. We have a whole system to which we are mentally and physically conditioned of dividing day and night into time slots. When to get up, when to have meetings. I'm just using this as an example. When to have lunch, dinner, supper, breakfast. And without that, we couldn't get together in any kind of orderly fashion. We couldn't start a retreat if we hadn't set a time for it. And for that, one has to be on time at the airport or bus station and so forth. But the person who brought this up wasn't talking about this kind of time. He said at times it has happened that there was just what was going on now, a very strong presence, and wondering what everybody else was talking about worrying about tomorrow. Worrying about tomorrow or yesterday. I think I've mentioned it once before, but I will again. There's so many new people. Once being in the house of my in-laws, father-in-law and mother-in-law were sleeping in the next room. The day before we had visited a new excavation. A highway had been built in Colorado, and by dynamiting the rock, what had become exposed was a marvelous accumulation of layers of different colored sedimental rock, or sediments of rock, dating back to millions of years. I don't have it remembered, but it was a beautiful exhibit, very carefully done. You could either sit in front of one of those exposed displays of layer, and then there were maps guiding you to what happened when, made a nice color. So that's where we had brought chairs. Our father-in-law and mother-in-law were sitting there while we were just traveling along this ramp there, in awe of the beauty of it. And when you think of the age of it, all of those thoughts have an effect. And our father-in-law was a very strict Christian Scientist. He read his 2 books every morning, and we had just very recently talked about the age of the earth, while he had asserted it was 5,000 years old. That was his belief, and it was so. That's how long ago God created the earth. And on the way back from this exhibit, he kept sort of mumbling to himself. He was amazed about these millions of years. And the next morning, I heard him laugh. It was early in the morning. I hadn't woken up yet. Laughing and trying to wake up his wife, saying, "Dear, dear, there is no time." She didn't sound too happy. And that went on. He says, "Why are we running hither and thither?" Repeating that. The amazement and a tremendous energy. It wasn't his usual self, which was very indoctrinated, or dogmatic, assertive. So what happens at times? What is time? One can look at it. One doesn't have to wait for some marvelous experience to wake one up. One can wonder, what is time? And look at it. Time is definitely thinking about tomorrow, isn't it? If you think about tomorrow, there's the future that I have to worry about, that I have to provide for, protect myself against, or look forward to. All of that created by thought based on past experiences, past knowledge. Because I think of next year or tomorrow, time is created in the mind and body and in our relationship with each other. The nice future we will have together, the good times that will come, or the bad times that are about to descend upon us. I'm not saying don't think about tomorrow. I'm not saying that. I'm just looking whether there is any instance in which there is a sense of time without thought. Whether when there is no thought about time, there is this time. Or there's just now. Now is also a word. It's not here-ness and now-ness. That can be very conceptual. And yet the concept of I'm living in the here and now can bring pleasant feelings to the body. Those words can arouse chemical reactions, which feel pleasant or unpleasant. What I'm talking about is a state in which there is no thought about tomorrow coming out of thoughts about the past. Just the sun shining, breathing, the sound of the wind, people breathing, people sitting, moving, words coming, looking. Where's time in that? Without the thought of tomorrow, is there fear of tomorrow? Can create tremendous fear about the future by thinking about it. But what is the future? Is it just thought happening now? Can one watch thought, words one says to oneself and others, and their effect, what they create? Because we usually take these creations as something independent of our thought. Future is independent of my thought. Fear is independent of thought. I know a woman who is a psychotherapist, very dedicated, lots of clients, patients. She says, why are you so concerned about thought all the time? What counts are the emotions, the feelings. Can one see connections between thought and feeling and thought? See them as they happen, so that intelligence comes into being about how things are created. One person said that. I didn't write that down. It's become very clear how I create my own sorrow through thought, resistance, fear of facing, and so forth. And I can see that if I can create it, it can also end. That's an enormous question, isn't it, whether sorrow can end? Can sorrow be seen? That's the first question. Be seen, felt, touched. Not just one's own personal sorrow. One may not be in sorrow right now, but all around one there's sorrow in human beings the world over. How does it come into being? And that one can only observe minutely, carefully, caringly in oneself. And with that comes compassion for people in sorrow. not ideas like, well, if they wanted to, they could help themselves. It's not a matter of wanting, it's a matter of seeing. And that can happen. Is that tied to sitting? A person asking, is there cause and effect relationship between sitting and having insight? Find out, don't ask me. Find out for yourself what seeing does, and see all the ideas one has had. Like people saying, for years I've believed that if I sit more and more regularly and so forth, something will happen to me. Can one see ideas and not put all this value and validity into them? Because we can have this idea and we can have the opposite idea. That sitting is no good. It's all a sham, it's an illusion. I was indoctrinated. Throw it out. Why does one not experiment for oneself? That's what people are doing. Find out about sitting and the expectations that come up due to past remembrances, creating the time of a future enlightenment. And all the while, not right here with whatever, the wanting, the fearing, the hurt or anger, or boredom. And then the question comes, well, can one only be with that while one is sitting? Well, find out. We have to find out. Somebody saying it will just put the question to rest and will sort of squash this inquiring spirit that we human beings have. So manifesting in little children. I wrote about it in the last newsletter. That has, through getting too many answers, it has been sort of dampened or held in abeyance or put into the finished file. But can awaken again. Find out if there is something about sitting a retreat, one has to come to a retreat without expectations or see the expectations. And in seeing them, not being totally carried away by them, or to see that expectation brings frustration, disappointment, or illusion. One expects a result with all the passion and energy and fantasy. One can experience all kinds of things. Now, if someone asks, well, how do you know that is the truth? I won't tackle that today. How do we know whether an experience is the truth? What is truth? That's a good question. We often ask, what's the truth of this moment, of myself? Meaning, what is there? What is going on right now? Actually, not in a deluded perception, what I want to be, what I want this to be, or what I'm afraid I am, and I can't see. So what is the truth? Can one know it? A person said. Several people have asked it. Can I know the truth? Meaning, is truth knowable through past experience, past reading, past knowledge? What do we mean by truth? Is that an obstacle in itself? To think in those terms? An obstacle to listening to the wind? Listening, the wind is there. I don't have to listen to it. Without wanting something of it or without fearing something for oneself. Just open, vulnerable listening.